In the year 2005, a time marked by the eagerly awaited arrival of the Xbox 360, the infamous corrupted blood outbreak within the realm of World of Warcraft, and the groundbreaking release of Resident Evil 4 that reshaped the gaming industry. There's one topic that often goes unnoticed: the intriguing and somewhat overlooked Japanese video game developer known as Spike. Spike began its journey as Yujin Gaisha Mizuki, a game developer and publisher in 1989. Over the next decade, it ended up selling off its print media and renaming itself to Spike. They had developed and published numerous games for many established franchises, some of which saw broad localization for markets outside Japan. This had attracted the eye of Bandai Namco, who had purchased the video game rights to Dragon Ball Z and was planning on making as much money as it could from them. So they tasked Spike to make a fighting game based around the martial arts tournament that in the manga was called Tenkaichi Budokai. That's how Budokai Tenkaichi was made, except not quite. In Japan, the game was released as Dragon Ball Z Sparking, which, as you might notice, is not Budokai Tenkaichi. Unlike Bandai Namco, Atari, who held the rights to publish in Europe and North America, thought that Sparking was not a suitable enough name for a fighting game based off the strongest under the heavens martial arts tournament, and so they released it as Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi. However, this game didn't have anything to do with the already established Dragon Ball Z Budokai series. In fact, it was likely because of the existing Budokai franchise that Atari chose this title, hoping to draw in existing fans with misleading marketing, because some things never ever change in video game publishing. Dimps, the video game studio responsible for creating the Budokai series, operated independently from Spike and weren't able to share assets between them. As such, the Budokai Tenkaichi team had to start from scratch. Spike, the developer, didn't have the luxury of building upon previous iterations. Rather than being an evolutionary step for the Budokai series, as many had hoped, it instead marked the beginning of a new direction for the franchise. Budokai Tenkaichi was Spike's ambitious attempt to emulate the unique and dynamic fighting style of the Dragon Ball Z series. To achieve this, they boldly departed from the more traditional 2D fighting system, opting for fully 3D environments and movement. Perhaps the most groundbreaking shift was the change in the camera perspective. Instead of the classic side view, the camera was positioned behind the character, offering an entirely fresh dimension to the battles. At the time of its release, this innovative approach was nothing short of revolutionary for the series, bringing players a level of immersion and authenticity that closely mirrored the exhilarating battles seen in the anime. Budokai Tenkaichi presents players with a visually appealing style, effectively utilizing cel shading techniques and excellent fighting animations, which manage to imbue each character with a distinct and engaging style. Despite this, some fighter models appear somewhat blocky when observed up close, but this does nothing to detract from the compelling rendering style Spike used in this game. In a bid to help players keep track of their opponents, the game introduced a lock-on system and a radar display in the corner of the screen. What's great is even in these seemingly functional elements, the developers seized the opportunity to incorporate elements of the series lore. For instance, characters wearing scouters could lock onto opponents from any position on the battlefield, a nod to the series. Additionally, androids remained hidden from the radar unless they are already locked onto, showcasing the meticulous attention to detail that would become a hallmark of the series. In terms of combat mechanics, when locked onto an opponent, a player's mobility becomes relative to their position, enabling dynamic dashes and strafing maneuvers. The melee combat was fairly straightforward, with punches executed using a simple press of the button, and consecutive button presses initiated combos. Players could alter the trajectory of their attacks by holding a directional input while launching them. Characters also boasted an array of super and ultimate moves, directly inspired by the source material. On the surface, all of these elements sounded promising, but unfortunately, what truly hampered this inaugural entry into the Tenkaichi series was its severe lack of refinement. The Tenkaichi series is renowned for its expansive character roster, and this first installment featured a noteworthy 58 playable characters, a record-breaking number at the time for a Dragon Ball Z game. However, it's worth noting that this count included various transformations, and curiously, the developers decided to exclude the ability for characters to transform during battles. Budokai Tenkaichi also introduced the novel concept of allowing players to assume the roles of large characters and giant apes, each possessing unique properties and abilities. Budokai Tenkaichi offered a diverse range of modes to cater to different player preferences. The main story mode, known as Z Battlegate, aimed to faithfully recreate scenarios from the Dragon Ball Z anime, GT, manga, and movies. However, the presentation of the story was underwhelming, featuring rigid and visually unattractive cutscenes. The mode incorporated specific objectives for battles, such as executing particular special moves or achieving victory within a predefined time frame. Nevertheless, the structure of the story mode felt somewhat disjointed due to the frequent menu transitions, and it was hard not to view this aspect as a downgrade when compared to Budokai 3. Additionally, the control scheme proved to be unintuitive and challenging for newcomers to grasp, a shortcoming exacerbated by the game's inadequate tutorial system. Another glaring issue was the camera, which lacked manual adjustment and instead rotated automatically based on the action. This design choice often led to frustrating moments where players would lose sight of their opponents, even though the radar was available to assist in locating them, unless you were playing against an android. Furthermore, the radar's responsiveness often fell short of expectations, and the camera had a tendency to become obstructed by environmental elements, such as walls or objects, at times making it nearly impossible to discern what was transpiring in the heat of battle. The first Budokai Tenkaichi game had the challenging task of following up on one of the greatest Dragon Ball Z games released up to that point, and despite its flaws, it managed to establish a strong foundation. This foundation would go on to serve as a platform for significant improvements in its direct sequel, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. The year 2006 witnessed several noteworthy events, including the launch of Sonic 06, Google's acquisition of YouTube, and of utmost importance to me, the release of Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. Sequels offered developers a chance to expand on their previous work, and Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 stands out as one of the best in its generation. Available on both the PlayStation 2 and Wii, with the Wii version including motion controls. It is important to note that the motion controls are optional, and the game supports various controllers, including the GameCube controller. Character models during gameplay are well crafted and address the blockiness from the previous game. The cell shading adds vibrancy, and characters have intricate details. The fighting animations are fluid and impactful, with each character bringing their unique style to the matches. Tenkaichi 1 reused the Budokai series music, but finally, Tenkaichi 2 introduced its own soundtrack, offering new music for fights. However, some tracks are reused excessively. One of Tenkaichi 1's biggest flaws was it done a poor job of teaching newcomers the game's mechanics. Fortunately, the tutorial in this game is an improvement, but still has some issues. Unlike the first game, you actually get to play the tutorial this time. You read through information cards explaining the controls and then practice these controls in a stage. However, there's a significant problem. It doesn't provide feedback or check off completed moves, and you have to manually exit the training menu to progress. This setup feels disjointed and offers no assistance to players facing difficulties. Tenkaichi 2, like its predecessor, lacks a smooth learning curve or gradual difficulty increase. The first hour of gameplay can be frustrating, with opponents ranging from too easy to nearly impossible. While it has a difficulty setting, it doesn't seem to address the problem, but rather bypass the difficulty spike. The camera has been improved from the previous game, using a transparent silhouette mode for character models when they get too close to the camera. This keeps the action unobstructed, and the camera angles are generally better, allowing for clearer views of the action. The stages are also better designed for the camera, with fewer obstructions. These changes significantly improve the gameplay, although the camera still struggles with characters above or below you. Engaging opponents involves locking onto them, either manually or automatically when close enough. However, the lock-on system can still be frustrating. The combat employs a straightforward control scheme, a single button for melee attacks, another for ki blasts, one for ki restoration, and two for dashing, either closing in or creating distance. Additionally, there's a block button, which can also be used for short distance teleportation when timed correctly. The use of ki-based abilities consumes your ki, but charging it to its maximum activates max power mode. In this mode, you gain access to specific moves that can be used with infinite ki until the blue gauge is depleted. While similar to the previous installment, the control scheme has undergone tweaks to enhance overall responsiveness, resulting in smoother gameplay. In this game, you can actually transform during battle, addressing a disappointment from the previous game. There is, however, an option to disable transformations when setting match parameters. Characters can also revert to their base forms, except for those with permanent transformations like Frieza and Cell. Evolution Z allows characters to equip Z items that improve various stats. Through earning experience, Z items can be enhanced. This levels up the Z items rather than the characters, making it transferable to other characters, eliminating a lot of the grind. The game also introduces tag team and free battles. Tag teams let you choose two characters to switch between during combat, each with their own health bar. Free battles involve up to 5 characters on each side and allow for fusions with the right character combinations. The story mode in this game resembles Budokai 3's Dragon Universe. You choose scenarios and fly around the world and engage in story battles and optional fights. There are also shops and exploration locations. The mode covers Dragon Ball Z and beyond. Unfortunately, the storytelling is clumsy and the cutscenes are notably poor, often relying on in-game animations. The voice actors deliver decent performances, though some cutscenes suffer from voice direction issues. Despite its flaws, this story mode flows better than Tenkaichi 1's and offers an impressive amount of content. Tenkaichi 2 boasts 129 playable characters, but this figure is arguably inflated, as it includes multiple forms of some characters, such as Kid and Teen Gohan and his ultimate form. It also includes every version of Vegeta. However, each form has distinct controls and movesets. Between the different forms and the transformations, some of which you can do in battle, I'd say the actual count is likely closer to 80 or 90 characters. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 is a prime example of a sequel done right. It enhances nearly every aspect of its predecessor and allowed the Tenkaichi series to establish its own identity apart from the Budokai games. While it's not without flaws, it unquestionably outshines Tenkaichi 1. Spike was learning how to make good Dragon Ball Z games, and their next entry would show just how good they could be. Adapting non-interactive content to interactive formats presents creators with significant challenges. They must balance faithfulness to the source material with gameplay and visual considerations while accommodating player actions. Spike provided an excellent example of this in 2007 when they released Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi 3 for PlayStation 2 and Wii. Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi 3 stands out for really putting you in the shoes of a Z fighter, unlike any other game in the series. It does this with immersive gameplay and aggressive attention to detail, making it one of the strongest entries into the series. Many consider it to be the best Dragon Ball Z game ever made. The in-game graphics closely resemble the second game, reusing character models and retaining the cel shading technique. This repurposing of assets allowed for more character-specific animations and attacks, enhancing each character's uniqueness without altering the core art style. This game included many new features, such as the Z counter, teleporting behind opponents, zigzagging while dashing, blast combos, and the rush key wave, which was a combo finisher for certain characters. A day and night system added extra depth, requiring characters like Raditz and Kid Goku to look at the moon at a night stage to transform into a great ape, while Vegeta and Turles can create artificial moonlight to transform anywhere. There are far more transformations, with some allowing specific moves. Goku, for example, can perform the Super Spirit Bomb in his base form. However, transformations have restrictions. Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta is a separate character, and other Vegeta forms can't achieve this transformation, nor can Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta revert to his base form. Tenkaichi 3 introduces slightly different controls and new gameplay features, but like its predecessor, the game lacks effective guidance for players, making control mastery a challenge and a potentially frustrating experience. This makes the learning curve steep, especially for newcomers. Mastering the basic movement mechanics, let alone character-specific moves and combos, took time and practice. Eventually though, the controls become second nature, and the fights become much more interesting. The combat speed was the fastest it had ever been. Tenkaichi 3 gameplay stands out with how it faithfully captures the dynamic and exhilarating battles found in the anime and manga. Ki blasts are visually impressive, appropriately sized with intense lighting effects that darken the screen, delivering a satisfying experience. The sound effects effectively emphasize attacks, maintaining the impact of each move. The English voice acting in the story mode surpasses Tenkaichi 2, offering better context-based performances, although dialogue suffers from occasional pauses. The music enhances battles with its fast pace and energetic tunes. The camera is once again positioned behind your character, providing many mobility options. It has been improved, with more dynamic movements during special attacks. The silhouette system returns now with an outline, offering even more effective character visibility than in Tenkaichi 2. Dragon History is the game's story mode, which, although notably shorter than Tenkaichi 2's, it has higher quality fights and is very satisfying to play. This mode is separated into sagas. Each saga blends story and battles, featuring narration and summarized events. The saga menu is very user-friendly compared to the prior games, with an on-screen character guiding you through the saga's menu. When selecting a saga, you can pick a difficulty level between 1 and 3 stars, which affects Z points and AI aggression, unlike in Tenkaichi 2 where lowering the difficulty would just neuter the opponents. To progress in the saga, you will fight in a larger segmented conflict until an on-screen button prompt triggers the next cutscene. This will follow the plot, but due to only having 2 characters on screen at any given time, the frequent character switching and off-screen dialogue makes the presentation suffer. Outside of the cutscenes, there are minimal explanations, making lore familiarity a must for newcomers. While this story mode lacks an overworld, there is a new feature instead, where several battles introduce what-if scenarios, offering alternate story endings if you ignore story prompts during battle. This game boasts over 150 characters that you can unlock and play as. It even includes some unusual characters you don't usually get to see, like Kid Chi-Chi. However, there is significant repetition in some of the characters, such as all the different versions of Goku and Gohan at various ages, and once again, every version of Vegeta. This repetition is somewhat offset by the different movesets and playstyle differences between the different versions of the same character. In fact, so many little details are added to the characters that it really makes them feel like their anime and manga counterparts. When Goku first becomes a Super Saiyan, his hair is fluffy and bleached blonde. However, once he has mastered it, it will appear more golden and sharp. In Tenkaichi 2, Cell transformations was only a power-up. In Tenkaichi 3, you can see him looking for and actually absorbing the androids. Now these are only visual features that have no bearing on the gameplay, but they do enhance the gaming experience. Tenkaichi 3 is still to this day considered to be one of the best Dragon Ball Z games ever made. No other DBZ game has quite captured the spirit and feel of the franchise, quite like Tenkaichi 3. The way this game adapts the source material into gameplay is unmatched by any other, and all of this while still being a generation behind the market in 2007. Spike had been producing lots of games for the 6th generation consoles, but as of 2006, the 7th gen had arrived, and the long lag time between Budokai Tenkaichi 3 and its sequel showed how much they were working at getting next gen right. Late 2009, Spike released their follow-up to Tenkaichi 3, named Dragon Ball Raging Blast. Released on the much more powerful platforms of the PS3 and Xbox 360, it found its way into hands of gamers who were eagerly anticipating the continuation of the trend of improvements they had seen with the last 3 Tenkaichi games. With the new generation came a new game engine and all new assets. Once again, Spike was starting from scratch, and for the first time, the new entry in the Tenkaichi series was a bit of a sidestep in quality rather than an outright improvement. The game's visuals are impressive, featuring detailed character models and vibrant cel-shaded art style that still holds up today. Each character boasts multiple costumes, adding variety to their appearances. Battles showcase stunning visual effects with vibrant energy attacks and fluid character animations. But the camera you use to look at these visuals stands out as one of its weakest aspects. It struggles to maintain a clear view of both the player character and the opponent at the same time. It also gets stuck in environmental objects, zooms in excessively to the point of obstructing the view, and makes it difficult to track characters above or below you. Players often have to rely on the auto lock-on function to refocus the camera, which can become quite tedious. What's baffling is that these camera problems were present in Tenkaichi 1, but were resolved in its sequels. It's almost as if the development team forgot the lessons they learned from the original Tenkaichi games, which were released 4 years earlier. Clearly though, Spike didn't forget all of the mistakes they had made in prior games, and corrected one glaring mistake in particular by including a tutorial that was actually good. It's divided into sections that can be played in any order. Piccolo will teach you the basics, and then Goku will go into more advanced techniques. When you complete one training section, you have the option of moving to the next. The controls will be explained to you, and you will be required to repeat the moves 3 times in order to pass. Even if the explanation wasn't clear enough, the controls remain on screen the entire time, making it very easy to figure out how they work. Which is good, because the controls in this game, as in the other Tenkaichi games, lack intuitiveness. Even for experienced players, some guidance might be necessary, making a good tutorial all the more welcome. Raging Blast would also include 2 new fighting mechanics, signature moves and cancels, and overhaul the customization system. Players can modify a character's deck with various items, each with different shapes and sizes. These items trigger specific effects or provide stat boosts, allowing for customization of a character's playstyle. Effects and stats can be stacked as long as they fit within the character's deck. Characters with multiple forms can equip different items for each form, tailoring their abilities to specific strategies. Special moves can also be customized for each form, adding diversity to gameplay. Raging Blast's customization system is highly versatile and engaging, offering plenty of options for players to experiment with. Much more important than customization was the implementation of signature moves and cancels that radically changed the flow of fights. In the game, each character possesses signature attacks that are unique to them. These attacks vary in nature, including melee strikes, dodges, and ki blasts. They serve a dual purpose of emulating the fighting style of a character as well as allowing players to string combos together, although ease of execution varies. For instance, some signature attacks can send the opponent flying, which can make it challenging to maintain a combo. This results in some characters being more conducive to extended combo chains, while others may pose challenges in this regard. A cancel refers to the interruption of a preceding action by immediately initiating another one. This is indicated by a yellow flash on screen accompanied by a sound effect. However, the mechanics of cancelling can be challenging to grasp. Sometimes players may activate impressive combos without fully understanding how they did it. This can be attributed to a lack of familiarity with a character's moveset and the occasional inconsistencies in hitboxes. Players may find themselves uncertain about whether an attack will hit behind the opponent or if it can be blocked or deflected from behind. Additionally, missed attacks may lead to unexpected pauses during fights, creating the sensation the game is not registering inputs correctly. Raging Blast has quite a large size roster, so mastering all of the signature moves and cancel combos can be a daunting task. While it doesn't boast as many characters as Tenkaichi 3, it does include the most iconic ones. Raging Blast focuses on quantity over quality in its story mode, prioritizing iconic battles over narrative coherence. The storytelling is disjointed and doesn't effectively convey the plot to newcomers or offer new insights for those familiar with the story. Despite Raging Blast borrowing heavily from Budokai Tenkaichi 3, the game doesn't appear to enhance on the previous installment. In fact, it seems like a step backwards in certain aspects. While the customization options are impressive, they are underutilized in a significant portion of the game. Although the controls become enjoyable once mastered, the camera and occasional combat interruptions hinder the experience. Visually, Raging Blast excels, but this doesn't compensate for its gameplay shortcomings. Overall, this game was a successful transition to the 7th gen consoles, but still displayed that Spike had more room for improvement. Mainstream console releases often steal the spotlight from their portable counterparts, a trend that holds true for the Tenkaichi series. Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi Tag Team, developed by Spike for the PlayStation Portable in 2010, arrived with minimal fanfare, overshadowed by the nearly simultaneous release of Raging Blast 2. Handheld games typically operate on tighter budgets and with smaller teams. While this might appear as a disadvantage, it sometimes grants the developers the freedom to experiment, and this is precisely where Tenkaichi Tag Team steps into the picture, offering a fresh take on the Tenkaichi gameplay. The Tenkaichi series hasn't exactly been known for its user-friendly controls, and the transition to the PlayStation Portable for Tenkaichi Tag Team required some adjustments. Even seasoned veterans of the series had to adapt to this modified control scheme. Fortunately, the game attempts to ease players into it with a tutorial. However, this tutorial falls short and ranks among the worst in Dragon Ball Z gaming history. Yes, even worse than the ones I've already complained about in the Tenkaichi series. The tutorial relies solely on text-based instructions, devoid of any gameplay segments to confirm the player's comprehension. Occasionally, a small screenshot accompanies the text, but that's the extent of it. Compounding the issues is the evident budget constraints reflected in the English translation, which is noticeably subpar. While not necessarily inaccurate, the presentation of information leaves much to be desired. Despite the tutorial's shortcomings, the gameplay itself shines through. Tag Team draws a lot of inspiration from the Budokai Tenkaichi series on the PS2. While the pace is slower, it manages to adapt the controls creatively to the PSP's limitations. Graphically speaking, Tenkaichi Tag Team lands where you'd typically expect a PSP title to be. It doesn't exactly shine as a visual masterpiece. It's worth noting that Tag Team faces some unique challenges due to the PSP's limitations. Tag Team supports up to 4 characters engaged in combat simultaneously, placing a greater strain on the system's rendering capabilities. Given these constraints, Tag Team's graphics hold up reasonably well. The game runs smoothly and remains visually coherent. The character models are fairly faithful to their original designs. Each character boasts a subtle outline enhancing their visibility against the background. This outline proves especially useful when the characters are positioned far from the camera. The camera fares a lot better in this game thanks to the competent lock-on system and the more simplistic stages, although occasionally peculiar camera movements can occur, though they seldom pose significant disruptions during fights. The main story mode in Tenkaichi Tag Team is known as Dragon Walker. This mode is organised into chapters that become accessible as the player advances through the campaign. Players take control of characters on an overall map very similar to that in Tenkaichi 2. Missions are assigned, often involving objectives such as searching for items or engaging in battles. True to its name, Tag Team emphasises team battles, but with a unique twist compared to the previous Tenkaichi titles. Players engage in battles with another character fighting alongside them. Tag Team implemented co-op actions to the fighting system. When a co-op action becomes available, it is displayed beneath the health bar, accompanied by a button prompt. These actions require a degree of synchronization between the player and their partner, which can be a bit tricky when playing with the AI-controlled allies. To address this issue, the game offers strategy settings. When a partner is AI-controlled, their fighting style is determined by the selected strategy. Focus makes them target the same enemy as the player, Normal lets them act freely, and Split has them engage the opposite enemy. While it would be a welcome improvement if the co-op actions played more of a central role in battles, they still seamlessly integrate into the existing Tenkaichi fighting system. While these actions don't revolutionize the way fights are approached, they smoothly introduce new strategic opportunities, particularly in 2v2 battles. Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi Tag Team can be seen as a portal rendition of Tenkaichi 2. It's remarkable what the developers managed to pack into this compact package. The game boasts an impressive roster of characters, a comprehensive story mode, and a variety of engaging extra modes to keep players entertained. Unfortunately, the partner AI falls short, often requiring you to chase them down to utilize the co-op features effectively, and none of the other entries even attempted to capitalize on what Tenkaichi Tag Team brought to the table. Raging Blast 1 was in many ways a step down from Spike's previous Budokai Tenkaichi games, with several previously addressed flaws resurfacing. However, it did mark the beginning of a new generation of games for a new generation of consoles, and in 2010, just a year after the first release, Raging Blast 2 hit the shelves. However, this game felt more like an expansion pack to Raging Blast 1 rather than a fully fleshed out sequel. What stands out the most about this game is the stark change in visuals. The animations in Raging Blast 2 maintain the fast-paced, stylized quality expected from a Dragon Ball Z game, effectively conveying the source material's high-energy action. The attacks in the game feel powerful, with the impact and speed lines accentuating the action. Ki blasts feature impressive effects, and the ultimate attacks remain a standout feature. The stages are large and detailed, with destructible elements enhancing the impact of attacks. Characters react to being attacked and display battle damage as fights progress. Raging Blast 2 largely retains character models from its predecessor, maintaining highly detailed and faithful representations of Dragon Ball Z characters. However, it introduces a different art style, characterized by excessive specular shading, which gives characters a shiny plastic-like appearance, greatly diminishing the visual quality compared to the original cel shading style used in the previous games. This difference in art style severely detracts from the improvements they made to the animations and all the little extras they included. It just doesn't live up to the visual standards set by its predecessor. While Raging Blast 2 does present some camera issues, such as occasional lagging, it's still an improvement over the camera problems encountered in Raging Blast. This means that only with the second 7th gen iteration of the game did it even equal the effective camera work of Tenkaichi 2 that was released 4 years earlier. The movement mechanics in Raging Blast 2 largely resemble those of the first game, including automatic opponent locking and freedom of movement via the analog stick. In Raging Blast 1, combat suffered from issues like sluggishness, inconsistent hitboxes, and unresponsive controls. Raging Blast 2 maintains the core mechanics while enhancing the gameplay. It offers a faster paced experience with smoother combos, fewer odd pauses, and the overall improved combat feel. Players can utilize steps and dashing to precisely position themselves for attacks and combos, with attack strings determined by their location. Steps are tactical moves employed in close quarter combat, enriching the range of possibilities for attacks and combos. Pursuit attacks introduce complexity to aerial combat, granting players the ability to chase and strike opponents in various directions by tilting the left stick. These sequences, while visually impressive, can be somewhat lengthy, distracting somewhat from the flow of battle. Assault Chase, a variation of Pursuit, centers on melee combat and permits players to extend combos, with the specific combo sequence varying for each character. Additionally, you can activate Raging Soul during battle, which facilitates longer combos but limits the use of super and ultimate attacks. Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2 replaces the traditional story mode with Galaxy mode, which lacks cutscenes but incorporates character interactions through in-fight banter. Each character has their own Galaxy mode, consisting of multiple fights presented on a grid with varying levels of difficulty and challenges. This game mode allows players to unlock characters, transformations, supers, items, and even screenshots. Some stages impose special conditions, such as starting with low health, which can add to the difficulty. To help overcome these challenges, players can turn to the character customization mechanic. While this is a little limited, with characters being restricted by a points system, it does help balance by preventing the creation of overpowered characters while making the more difficult stages easier to overcome. While Galaxy Mode provides numerous battles and interesting character interactions, it feels more like a side mode rather than the main focus of the game, drawing attention to the lack of a traditional story mode as was found in the previous titles. The game boasts a larger roster of characters and additional stages, yet its modes come across more as a DLC to Raging Blast 1 rather than a true sequel. The overall experience feels somewhat incomplete. Despite significant gameplay improvements that address many of the issues present in the first installment, Raging Blast 2 builds upon and refines the fundamental mechanics of its predecessor, resulting in a more responsive and enjoyable combat experience compared to Raging Blast 1. But it still doesn't reach the height seen in Budokai Tenkaichi 3. It feels like a pale imitation of a Tenkaichi game, rather than a full entrant into the series. The Raging Blast series in general doesn't elicit much enthusiasm. While it aimed to evolve the Budokai Tenkaichi series, it feels like a step backwards in many respects. As 2010 turned into 2011, hard times were on the horizon for Spike, and despite Spike gearing up for another release in the Tenkaichi series of games, their owner Dwango had to be wondering if Spike was worth the investment. With the reviews for the Raging Blast series of games being far lower than the Budokai Tenkaichi games, and sales figures for both series being less than just Tenkaichi 3 on its own, it seemed like maybe Spike was nearing its end. This next entry was their final chance to renew faith into the franchise. Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi was released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2011. It is the final entry of the Budokai Tenkaichi series so far. The games have seen a sharp decline in art style during the 7th generation, transitioning from the visually impressive Raging Blast through a questionably looking Raging Blast 2 to a noticeably shabby looking Ultimate Tenkaichi. The prevailing art direction in Ultimate Tenkaichi leans towards muted colours, resulting in a lackluster visual experience. Character textures appear muddy and poor quality and don't really match the backgrounds, drawing even more attention to their questionable art decisions. Despite this, the stages manage to align with the more realistic art style, but exploration is limited due to the game's restrictive nature of combat. Some of the larger key attacks and auras look passable, they just suffer from the same muted colours as everything else. The Super Saiyan transformations in this game resemble legendary Super Saiyans with an unappealing, underripe banana colour scheme that just looks bad. Overall, Ultimate Tenkaichi's visual presentation is disappointing and detracts from the gaming experience. Ultimate Tenkaichi's core gameplay heavily relies on in-game cutscenes that frequently interrupt player actions. While the cutscene animations are decent, their lack of variety becomes apparent as players repeatedly witness the same sequence over and over again. The game's continuity between attacks is inconsistent, with characters frequently teleporting around, causing disorientation. Ultimate Tenkaichi's gameplay can be succinctly described as tedious and repetitive. While sharing a control scheme with Raging Blast, it simplifies mechanics to the point where player agency feels almost non-existent. Fights tend to follow a repetitive pattern of approaching opponents, executing rush attacks, and engaging in QTE-based cutscenes. The game's 3D environments allow movement in all directions, but it limits players to two states, melee and blast range, each dictating available actions. Melee range offers only two basic attacks, creating a restrictive and unresponsive combat experience. A coin flip mechanic in attack clashes often determines the outcome of exchanges, leading to drawn-out and frustrating encounters. Blast range permits key attacks but proves less effective, with rush key attacks feeling ineffective due to the distant camera perspective. In order to use supers and ultimates, you must utilize Spirit, a separate resource from Ki. Spirit is built up through heavy hits and pursuits. Supers and ultimates can be guarded, evaded, or intercepted by the opponent, depending on their Ki level. However, the game's mechanics sometimes make it feel like it's not worth the effort. Spirit High Mode activates when a fighter has low health, allowing fighters to unlock the ability to use ultimates, but in practice, neither supers nor ultimate attacks see much use due to the restrictive mechanics. The normally high-quality Tenkaichi fighting system feels diluted, plagued by obnoxious QTEs and an over-reliance on chance-based mechanics. This makes battles feel repetitive and lacking in depth. where the repetitive animations and lack of meaningful player input results in a boring gameplay experience. With only 41 characters, Ultimate Tenkaichi pales in comparison to every other game in the series. Character variety is further limited as most characters play the same. Overall, it's a disappointment that makes the game feel hollow. This is not made up for even slightly by the ability to make your own character in hero mode, which is one of the game's single-player story modes. You are only allowed to pick from 3 choices for hair and body types, with most of your character's uniqueness coming from colour palette swapping. The body type you choose, either standard, light, or heavy, determines your hero's abilities. Once you're done with the limited amount of customization, you get to embark on a new storyline. Gameplay in this mode features an overworld map for free flight exploration, similar to the story mode in Tenkaichi 2. Here players can engage in main story fights and optional battles. Winning fights rewards your character with experience points and stat improvements. Fighting every battle available feels like a grind, with the only benefit it gives you making you stronger and making subsequent fights a little easier, potentially not worth the time investment, as bypassing these fights entirely doesn't detract at all from the experience of playing through this game mode. Beyond experience gains, you can enhance your hero's abilities and equip super attacks through training. Masters you encounter in hero mode offer unique skills and fighting styles as you spar with them. At certain points during the story mode, scenes from the anime are included, although their 2D nature clashes with the game's pseudo-realistic art style. While hero mode introduces promising ideas such as training under masters and customizing character abilities, it falls short due to limited options and repetitive gameplay. Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi had some compelling concepts, but was dragged down by very poor execution. Shortly after the game was released, Dwango decided that Spike would be better off merging with its sister company Chunsoft. The two companies had worked hand in hand on certain games, such as the Danganronpa series, and Spike was the publisher for many of Chunsoft's games, so for Dwango, this probably seemed like a no-brainer. And in 2012, the merger was complete, as was Spike as a developer. The last Dragon Ball Z game that they were working on prior to the merger would still come out, and it would be the last time that Spike or Chunsoft would get to work on the Bandai Namco franchise. Dragon Ball Z Kinect is essentially a reskin of Ultimate Tenkaichi, with exclusive controls for the Xbox 360 Kinect. It was absolutely panned by both fans and critics, and is rated as one of the worst Dragon Ball Z games of all time. So where does that leave the series? A new Budokai Tenkaichi game has been announced, and it seems logical that Bandai Namco would give it back to Spike, but Spike is no more. As their talent left, their game quality deteriorated, and they were absorbed into Chunsoft. Is there anyone left at Spike Chunsoft that can continue the legacy of the Tenkaichi series? The gaming landscape has undergone significant transformations since the series reached its pinnacle in 2007. With the advent of Dragon Ball Super, one wonders if it will introduce contemporary gaming trends like microtransactions and DLC packs. Could these become the norms for the future installments of Budokai Tenkaichi? Loot boxes, season passes, and only a few core characters released at launch. Perhaps we will never again see the likes of the impressive character count for Tenkaichi 2 and 3, or if we do see it, it will be more of a burden on players and fans' wallets than on the game engine of the 9th generation consoles it will surely be optimized for. Only time will tell.